So it's 3 o'clock, time to get started for our long arm class. I'm Nancy Bronstein. I am a Pfaff educator, and I'm so happy that you're joining me today for my class. I love long arming, and I hope that you will pick up some interesting tips or tidbits today. I don't know whether you are currently long armers or want to be long armers, but we're going to assume that there are some people on the Facebook Live that are thinking about becoming long armers, so we have to start from a bit of a basic level. And since we only have an hour, we can't take a deep dive into any one aspect of long arming. I'm going to do an overview. And if there's a topic that I just sort of skate over a little bit that you would like me to do a lot more on in the future, we are in the midst of scheduling future Facebook Live events. So if there's something you want to hear about or you want me to go into more depth of some topic that I cover today, please let us know in the comments, because we will be reading those and taking that into account when we do our scheduling. So why would somebody want a long arm? Well, there are a lot of reasons why. Well, I know why I wanted to have one, but some people want to have a long arm because they have lots of quilt tops and they don't want to spend the money to quilt by check. It will save you money, definitely. You know that sending your quilts out to a really good long armer is not cheap, because it takes a lot of skill and time for them to do it, and that they earn every penny that they get. But if you have your own long arm and start to quilt your own quilt tops, eventually you will pay for your machine. Essentially, if you do one of your quilt tops a month, you will probably pay for your machine in no time flat. Another reason why people want to get a long arm is that they want to do the whole quilt. You know, they like the idea that it's just their hands that were involved in creating that quilt. It wasn't sent out to somebody else to work on. Another reason why people want a long arm is because they no longer want to have to baste their quilts. I know before I had a long arm, I had a room where I would lay my quilt sandwich out to baste it together, and I don't really like crawling around on the floor anymore. I don't have a big table area where I could do it very, very well, so I used to do it on the floor, and I'm really happy not to do that anymore. So there's all sorts of reasons, and there are all sorts of long arms. Today I'm going to cover some of the pros and cons of different styles of long arms. Yeah, they're kind of like cars, you know. I like to have a car or a vehicle where I can throw 2 bikes in there and haul stuff, and that's my kind of vehicle. You may like a Mini Cooper. So everybody is different, and it's no different with long arms. People like different styles, and I'm going to cover some of that today. So I'm going to switch back over to my PowerPoint and show you our current Pfaff long arms. They're called the Power Quilter. There is a 1600 version that is a sit-down long arm machine, and there is the 1650, which is on rollers, and you have 3 options for the table that you put it on. We have our fabric frame, which I'll show you a picture of, and then we have full-size quilting frames. Now the 1600, that table is approximately 36 by 32 inches. So you have lots of room to put a big quilt under that needle. The arm is 16 inches long and 8 inches high, so there's plenty of space there. And generally, the people who like the sit-down quilter, well, you know, a lot of them are people that don't like to stand. You know, they have back problems or knee problems, and or they just prefer moving the quilt under the needle rather than the needle over the quilt. So that's the typical reasons to get a quilter like the 1600. So this is the fabric frame, the smaller frame that you can have the 1650 on. And this frame is 5 inches, teeny tiny quilts, 5 feet long. or 5 feet wide. So this is the type of frame for people who don't have space for a big 10 or 12-foot quilting frame, because that takes up a lot of space, believe me. The advantage is the size, and you can set it up so that you're sitting or standing. Now, the disadvantage to me is that you do need to base your quilt to put it in the fabric frame. It clamps onto those two rods, and it's very easy to load it. You can do a king size quilt in that quilting frame. You're going to put it into the frame and do all one side. Then you're going to pull the quilt over and do the other side. So I have done a king size quilt in the fabric frame because I used to have one. And I had it and I was using it with my Icon because it is compatible with your domestic machines, and the bigger the throat space on your domestic machine, the bigger your quilting area on the fabric frame. So I used my Icon on there before I got an actual long arm. Now we do have a 12-foot and a 10-foot frame that you can put the power quilter on. Here's a picture of my long arm. Unfortunately, I'm going to be showing you little videos, even though this is a Facebook Live, of my long arm, because as you can see, my long arm is in my basement. And my internet connection in my basement is dodgy at best, and it would not create very good video quality. So I made some videos, and I'm going to show those to you so that you can see the long arm in action. But this is my setup at home in my basement. I have the 12-foot table, and I love it. So we're going to show you a little bit more here. Now, when you first get the, if you do have a power quilter, on YouTube, if you search on Pfaff Power Quilter 1600 or 1650, we have 18 different instructional videos on things like setting it up, how to thread it, how to correct your tension, how to wind a bobbin, all the basic stuff that a new user would need to know. So it is a tremendous resource. And I was going to give a little bit of advice for people getting started. Now, this monstrosity here is what I did when I first got my long arm. I took 2 old sheets and a flannel blanket, made a quilt sandwich, and just tried out all kinds of stitches. I tried out different threads, I tried out different rulers, and just tried out all sorts of things because I knew that I was just going to throw this away. Actually, before I even got to this stage, the first thing that I did was I practiced with paper and pen. And I'll give you just a little tip. I had always heard that when you start to do free motion quilting, whether it's on a domestic machine but especially on a long arm, you want to practice on paper first. And I was trying it and it didn't seem to be helping all that much. And then I realized that if you hold a pen like you're going to write, you're unconsciously using the fine muscles in your hand to change the angle of the pen. You can't do that when you have the needle and you're moving it over the fabric. Your needle is just going to do this. So I would recommend that if you want to practice, you hold the pen like this and then do your designs on the paper. And that's more like the motion that you will be doing on a long arm. So that's for people that I have the stand-up quilter where you are moving the needle over the fabric rather than the fabric under the needle like you would with the sit-down, the 1600. So get some paper and hold it like this and make your designs so that once you go to the next step where you are practicing on an old quilt that you don't care about or sheets like I did, then you'll be in much better shape. Then the second thing that I did after I did this sheet set, I got a panel and practiced on that because I wanted something where if I ruined it, it was just a $15 panel. It wasn't a quilt that I had spent hours and hours and hours on. So these are a good first step when you first start to quilt. And That way, if you mess it up, just get another panel. It's not a big deal, not a huge loss. Now, as I'm going along, if anybody has any questions, please don't hesitate to ask. I am not reading the questions, but I have someone who is, and they will let me know, and I will be glad to pause and answer any questions. So the Power Quilter has a number of accessories that as you go along, you might want to add on to your quilting experience. And these are just some of them. We have foot sets, we have the ruler table and the rear handlebars, and I'm going to show you what those actually are. When you are doing long arm quilting, the front part of the machine where the needle bar is and the stitch plate is very narrow. If you're going to do ruler work, it really helps to have this tray or ruler base. And this, let me see if I can get my pen to work here. This gives you a lot of added real estate here. It just stabilizes the ruler much better. In fact, I leave mine on all the time. Doesn't affect even when I'm doing free motion. The only thing that it can cause an issue with is when you get way off to the end of your quilt and you have clamps. The clamps can hit the edge of the ruler base. But what I have a yardstick and I put it underneath the bungees on the clamps, and that holds them up enough that I can go right to the edge and the ruler base doesn't get in the way. And if you are going to do ruler work, you're going to want the ruler foot. It has a taller profile here. So it is much easier to use the rulers with the ruler foot. And it has a little cutout here so you can see better. And just so you know, all rulers are not created equal. The domestic rulers for ruler work on a domestic machine are thinner, and those are not going to work on a long arm. You want the rulers that are designed for a long arm. They're thicker, because what can happen with the domestic machine rulers is that because they're not as thick, is the ruler foot can jump on top of them and break your ruler, perhaps break your needle, perhaps throw off your timing. So it's just not worth risking that. Get the right ruler for the machine that you have. So here I'm going to go into more depth about the optional feet that we have. We have these square feet. One's a 1/4 inch, one's a 1/2 inch. These feet are really good if you want to do, say, matchstick quilting. You want to do straight line quilting and you want them all to be the same distance away from each other, either a 1/4 inch or a 1/2 inch. And they are also really good for putting your binding on while you have your quilt loaded on the long arm. You can actually sew the strip down, you can make a miter and then go across, and so you can do the first part of sewing down your binding if you have the square foot set. Then the Echo foot set is sort of similar, but it is better for when you're echoing around curved objects as opposed to doing the straight line quilting. You can do straight line quilting with it too. And it has slightly different distances from the square foot set. So it gives you a little bit more option for the distance between your echoes. Then we have this glide foot, which is kind of an interesting looking foot. You wonder, well, why would I need that? That is a really handy foot for when you have a quilt loaded that is very intricate and it has a lot of seams going into a central area, so it's kind of bumpy. This glide foot will glide right over that. And right now I have a quilt loaded that I put piping along, like a square of piping along the edges of the quilt, and then have sashing along the sides of the piping. And all the other feet don't want to glide over that piping, but the glide foot will just, there's no problem. It just goes right over it. Another thing you can do with the glide foot is you can do yarn couching. So if you like that look, you might like to have the glide foot. Then the rear handlebars. They're sort of a funny thing to think about. What people wonder, well, why would I want to quilt from behind? Well, I'm going to show you a video of how that works, but it is an interesting technique using pantographs, and I'll go into that in more detail in a minute. So I think that might be it. Oh, I've got a little video here to show you. And oh, it's already starting. So I'm going to narrate this video. So before you do anything with tension on the top part of a long arm, you first adjust the tension in the bobbin. Unlike a domestic machine, the bobbin tension is set first. And this is getting ahead of me. Let's see if I can stop this and go back. Okay, technology is not my friend right this minute. Okay, so I'll just explain it very quickly because I can't stop this for some reason. So you set your tension in the bobbin, and then if you need to make it looser or tighter, you're going to use that screw. If you're the type of person that wants to be very exacting, there are these gauges that will tell you exactly what your bobbin tension is. You just need to get an M-bobbin gauge. Now I'm going to show you how to thread the Power Quilter 1650. Of course, you put it through the thread stand first, then it goes into this pigtail there, and then it's going to go into this 3-hole, I don't remember the name of it, but it's going to hold the thread in place. You go from back to front, then you go around and back, go from back to front, and you're going to go around again and go from back to front. So you've put it through all 3 of those holes. Now, if you're using a delicate thread, say a metallic, you may want to only go through 2 holes. You're going to experiment with that. If you're getting breakage, you may want to just use 2 holes because that'll give you less tension on the thread. And it's easier to sew with the more delicate threads. Now you want to make sure that you get it into those tension discs really well. In fact, I'm showing you here where the tension discs are, and then I will grab it and kind of floss it to make sure that it is really into those tension discs. Because if you don't get it in those tension discs, you're going to have an ugly mess on the back of your quilt like this. You get all this eyelashing. I had to pull all of those stitches out. And so it's best to always check that it's in the tension discs, and I even look underneath my quilt to make sure that the stitch is doing well after I have threaded it, whenever I change the thread. And I'm just down here threading the needle. The needles have a little groove on the front, so if you can't really exactly see the hole, you can kind of slide down that groove and go in. So now I'm talking about adjusting the top tension, or I'm showing you how to adjust the top tension. The top tension, when it needs adjusting, you do quite a big move. The bobbin, when it needs adjusting, it's like the minutes on a clock. It's just a minute or 2 that you're going to change. Now I'm showing you that it is, there's a big arm there. It's 16 inches that way, 8 inches the other way, and there are LED lights under there. So the lighting is really good underneath your needle. And I'm just going to show you a little bit of free hand, free motion quilting there. And so you can see what that looks like. Now, some people, if they get tired of standing, they actually use these stools called saddle stools, which you can look up on Amazon. They're on wheels, and you can adjust the height, and so you can sit while you can alternate between standing up while you're quilting and sitting. So So now I'm going to show you some of my favorite rulers. I have a lot of rulers these days, but these are the ones I use the most. I use the straight edge the very most. I do like modern quilts a little bit better than traditional. This is a ruler that has a lot of different shapes on it, so that you can have this sort of big curve or a more shallow curve or a V shape. So this has got a lot of choices. And then this ruler is really good for going around applique, doing stitch in the ditch around applique. And then lots of circles, so you can do arches and circles on the quilt. So there are so many rulers, so many rulers. So here I'm starting to quilt, so I'm going to hit the needle down, then have it come back up. I'm going to pull my thread and then pull up my bobbin thread. You always want to start that way so you have a nice clean back. And then I'm just going to take a couple of short stitches to lock it, and then I'm going to use the ruler to stitch in the ditch. Now, when I'm doing stitch in the ditch with the ruler, I go pretty slow to make sure that it stays in the ditch. And you'll see that I go a lot faster when I'm just doing a line of stitches. So this is a scrap quilt. So there's not a lot of fancy quilting on it because it's made out of a lot of scraps that I actually pieced with my serger. And you'll see in a minute that the scrappy diamonds in the middle, there's actually flat lock stitches done with a 12 weight thread. And it makes a nice texture, I think. And certainly piecing with the serger is super fast. So I did long strips of different width pieces of fabric and just zipped down those with the serger, doing the flat lock stitch. So now I'm going to start to do some stitches where I am just doing kind of like matchstick quilting, but not at set intervals because it's a scrappy quilt. And you see I can pick up a lot more speed and the ruler keeps it nice and straight. But you do sometimes need to, if you're going a long distance, you do need to stop the sewing so that you can readjust the ruler. So the little red bits, here we go. Here's the flat lock stitches from the serger when I pieced that part together. And then here's some other stitches that I did with the ruler and some free motion. And you also see the flat lock stitches separating each block. Now, pantographs, that's where the rear handlebars come into play. These attach onto the back of your machine. And pantographs are kind of like line drawings that you trace. You need a laser light. And I see the light is, you see that little tiny red light? You use that red light and you drive from behind and you just trace the design. And this design I just downloaded off the internet for free. There are tons of pantographs of every sort and type that you can imagine. And you just trace over it to make a beautiful design driving from behind. So I think that's the end of that. Yeah. So do we have any questions? Let's see. Okay, so it looks like there's no questions right now. I was expecting some questions, so I will show you the feet so you can see them up a little closer and get an idea what they look like. They are pretty sizable. This is 1 of the square feet. So you can use this with a ruler. You know, the sides are high enough that you can place the ruler along the side. And that is the 1/2 inch. And this is the 1/4 inch foot. Again, you can use that with the ruler. Sometimes I'll, you know, I know I want to do some ruler quilting and I'm pretty close to the end and I know I'm going to do binding, I'll just put these on and use them with the rulers. Although the metal foot is the preferred foot for the rulers. And then here's your glide foot. Looks like a kind of like a bowl. And you can pull some yarn through there and stitch along and do yarn couching. Now I see a question, do these also work on the P3? We're going to have to look into that. I don't know offhand. I'm not familiar with the P3, but we will find out about that and post that. And then we have the Echo quilting feet. This is the 3/8 inch foot. And then we have the 1/2 inch foot. And the big daddy 3/4 inch foot. And again, you can use these with your rulers because they have a lip on them. And many times I have used them because I wanted to be able to echo. The distance keeps your echo the same distance. Like when you use this foot in a ruler, your echoes will be 3/4 of an inch apart from each other. And when you use this foot with the ruler, your echoes will be 1/2 inch away from each other. So that's the idea with having different sizes, so that your distances will be uniform and there's different choices for narrower or wider. And let's see if there's anything else I was going to say. So any other questions or topics that you would love for us to do in future Facebook Lives, going into more depth with long arming? I had thought there would be some questions and allowed time for that, and it doesn't appear that there are a lot of questions. And unfortunately, since I am not at my long arm, because as I said in the beginning, my long arm is in my basement, and that's why I showed you a video, because my internet connection currently, because I live out in the country, is not strong enough for me to do live from the basement. Or if I did, you would not want to watch it. So let's see, fabric loading on the 1650. Yes. So with our fabric frame, you're going to load one way. You know, you're going to have to baste it somehow. You're going to either spray baste it or pin baste it before you put it in the fabric frame, because there are clamps that hold it in position. Now, with the frame like I have, the 10 or the 12-foot frame, there's rollers, so you are going to load the backing, the batting, and the top and roll it, and that keeps all the layers together, so you don't have to baste beforehand. And there are different ways to set up how to load it, depending upon how you're going to quilt it. And I could certainly do a video on that, because if you're going to keep it loaded so that they're all 3 separate layers, then when you start out, you load your backing and then your batting, and then you put the top on the top of the backing and you baste along the edge and along the top. And as you're going along, you're going to keep basting along the edges. But if you are a person who wants to start in the middle or wants to use different colors, then you are probably going to base the whole quilt and some other pieces, and so you're going to load it in a different way. So it just depends upon which way you are planning to quilt that, and this may not make sense to people who don't have a long arm, but it would be a great topic for a more lengthy video. So thank you for asking that. Let's see. Do either of these machines have computer digital pattern quilting capability? Not at this time, unfortunately. But you can do the pantographs and do everything else, but there's no robotics at this time. Actually, I thought I was going to go somehow. I know, I wanted to show you the controls on the machine. That reminds me. Let me bring that up. I don't know what happened to that picture. So, for some reason, this doesn't want to load. Okay, I'm having a little bit of technical difficulty, but I will talk to you about the controls on the machine. I did have a visual, but I neglected to mention that, of course, there is a stitch regulator on the machine, and you can run the machine either in manual or regulated mode. And if you are in regulated mode, there's two modes within that. There's one that's more continuous, so that as you're quilting, it's going to speed up as you speed up and slow down as you slow down. But if you stop still, the needle's going to keep going, but very slow. And that's good for doing curves and free motion and feathers. Then there's a mode where the needle will keep going while you are moving, but as soon as you stop, it stops. And some people like to use that mode for ruler work. I tend not to do that. I use the continuous mode because it slows down enough that often I can just move the ruler and I can keep going. If I feel like I need a little bit more time to get the ruler just right, in your handlebars on the right-hand side, there is a start button. So I keep my hand on the trigger, my finger on the trigger, so to speak. And when I come to a point where I can't move the ruler fast enough, I'll just stop the machine. I prefer the continuous motion mode. So you can just put it in manual if you want, if you don't want it regulated at all. I rarely use that unless I'm doing micro stippling, teeny tiny stipples. And I also will, with micro stippling, increase the number of stitches per inch. There's a stitch per inch area on the controls, as well as stitch per minute, the speed control, basically. When you first start that speed, you want to keep low until you are more adept. I would keep it at like 75. And then the stitches per minute, I generally keep it between 10 and 12. Unless I am basting, then I do 4 per inch. And if I'm doing micro stippling, I might go up to 14 so that the stitches are very tiny. And let's see if we have any other questions. But does the speed have to ramp up if you use the stop mode? Not really. I mean, it pretty much just starts right up. Like I said, I always use continuous though, so I haven't paid really close attention to that. Because sometimes I don't want it to stop. Because I'm just going to curve the ruler and I want it to keep going. It goes pretty, once you slow down, once you stop, it goes pretty slow. It just, so it's slow enough that I can often just keep going, even with a ruler. And I always, like I said, have my finger on the start, and then I can just hit that, move my ruler, turn it back on. So both handles have controls on them. The one on the left is needle up and needle down. and speed control, I believe. The one on the right is, I think, speed control and start stop. I mainly use start stop and speed control. That's why I know which is which. The other one I think is speed control, but I'm not positive. And that, oh, maybe I have a picture here I can show you. Yeah, it's not going to, for some reason, it doesn't want to show pictures at this moment in time. Technology is great when it works, and then when it lets you down, it lets you down. So let's see, any other questions? Or any other ideas of things that you would like us to cover for future Facebook Lives? Again, please place that in the chat, and we will add that to our list of suggestions for future Facebook Lives. We are doing them about every 2 weeks, and are setting up our schedule for late spring and summer right now, and would love to have your input. So I'm finishing early. Is there, if there's not any other questions, I would like to let you know that we are doing more Facebook Lives, like I said, every 2 weeks. I know I'm doing another one on quilted jackets at the end of April. So I'm going to show different ways to make quilted jackets, like making it from scratch, where you're going to do the piecing, or also taking an old quilt that you want to cut up for a jacket, if you don't feel like that's a horrible thing to do. I have some quilts from when I first started Free Motion that I'm going to, cut out the bad parts and keep the good parts to make a jacket. So I'm going to show different methods. It's not going to be a step-by-step class because of the fact that it's only an hour long, but it will give you an overview of how you would go about doing something like that to make a quilted jacket, and different methods to do that. So I've got a question. Does Pfaff still make the P3? I do not believe so. I think we are just having the Power Quilter 1600 and the 1650. The 1600 is the sit-down version, and the 1650 is the version that you would put on a frame. So the sit-down version is for people who like to move the fabric under the needle, and the 1650 is for people who want to move the needle over the fabric. I think everybody has their own personal preferences for this whether you want to do one or the other. I find that it's easier to do ruler work where I'm moving the needle and the fabric is stationary. When I've done ruler work with a domestic machine where I'm moving the fabric, I feel like I wish I had a third hand. I just don't feel like I have the control that I do when the fabric is stabilized. I use one hand to hold the ruler and the other hand to move the head of the machine. And that's what works best for me, but everybody's different. So let's see, any other questions? So what I'm going to do is I have a little bit more time. I'm going to see if I can get the video to run again in case someone wants to see any part of that. And, some people may have signed on late and might have missed that. So let's see if I can get that to happen. Let's try again. So in the beginning, I'm showing how to get the tension correct in your bobbin, because you start with the bobbin with long arming. You don't adjust the top tension first. And you're going to load it like any typical bobbin where it clicks in place. And then to check the tension, well, first of all, you want to make sure that it's turning clockwise. That's the way it should turn, as opposed to a domestic machine. And then when you pull the thread, you want it to stand up in your hand like that, and the thread comes out easily. Oh, I'm not even showing you the video, am I? I'm talking and not showing you the video. It, for some reason, didn't switch. Technical difficulties again. Okay, here we go again. So as I was saying, you check the tension first, and you're going to, first of all, get it loaded like any other bobbin, clicks in place. You pull the thread, make sure it's going clockwise. Then to check the tension, you pull on the thread, and the bobbin should be able to lift up off your hand, not flop over, and yet the thread comes out easily. Show that again. Then after you get the tension right on the bobbin, then you can adjust the tension on the top thread. You know that tension is kind of an interplay between the bottom bobbin thread and the top thread. And there's the screw that you adjust. If it's too loose, you turn it right, because righty-tighty. If it's too righty-tighty, right makes it tighter, lefty-loosey makes it looser. And then here is a tension gauge if you want to be really exacting. And you can consult your thread manufacturer to see what they recommend as their the tension that's best for their bobbin thread. And nobody asked me about what threads I use. I'm really shocked. I thought that would be one of the first questions. I started out using cotton thread because most quilters use cotton fabric, and they are kind of they love cotton thread. But for me, I found that it created a lot of lint in the bobbin area, and also that would carry over into the tray and the rollers on the machine, so that move the machine from side to side. If you get lint underneath your rollers, you won't have a smooth glide. So I switched to polyester thread. I like so fine thread in the bobbin, and I like glide in the top. And glide is made by Quilting, and so fine is made by Superior. And on Superior's site, you can check what tensions they recommend for their various threads. So fine, I know they want you to have a tension of about 170 to 200. So here's an example what it looks like when you don't get your thread in the tension discs. So every time that I rethread my machine, like if I change colors, if I can, I'll stitch a little bit on the outside of the quilt, or if I don't have room to do that for some reason, I'm in the middle of the quilt, I will stitch a little bit and look underneath. I want to make sure that I'm not getting that eyelashing. And because every time you rethread it, if you don't get it into those tension discs, you won't be happy with your results. Then the tension on the top, you turn it quite a bit in order to adjust it. And of course, turning it to the right makes it the tension higher, tight, righty-tighty, lefty-loosey. And we do have these LED lights under there, and you can see the quilt in the background. That's my design wall. It's a quilt that I'm currently working on, piecing. And as I said before, this is a scrap quilt that is in the frame. And right next to my right hand, there are clips that you can purchase, not from us, but they are channel locks, so that if you want to lock your machine so it will only go horizontal or only go vertical, so that you can make really straight, long lines, those channel locks come in handy. Your local quilt store would probably have them. A lot of the handy quilter accessories, the ones that we don't have, the obscure ones like these channel locks, are compatible with the Power Quilter 1650. And again, I'm showing my favorite rulers. This is a handy quilter ruler, as well as this is their Versatool, which has a bunch of different shapes. Okay, and somebody wants me to repeat the threads, which I will in a minute. This is that's a really nice odd looking ruler in that it's great for doing stitch in the ditch around applique. And then our circle shapes. So the threads that I like are Glide on the top by Quilting and So Fine on the bottom by Superior Threads. They're both polyester. And polyester not only makes very little lint, it's also color fast. So, you know, something that's going to be washed a lot will retain its color better in polyester than in cotton or rayon. And I'm just using the ruler to do some stitch in the ditch, which makes it, you know, a bit slower than just doing a straight line. But it helps to keep it nice and straight in that ditch. And you can see the little red flat lock stitches that I mentioned before. Making this quilt, I took really long strips of fabric and sewed them together very quickly with the flat lock and on the serger, and then cut them at 45-degree angles to assemble these scrappy diamond-shaped blocks. This, as you can probably tell, is leftover holiday fabric. Now I'm no longer going to be in the ditch, so you can see a more usual speed for doing straight lines with the ruler. So it is quite an expanse, so I'm going to go part way. Then I'm going to stop it by touching the start button. No, I'm not. I already did that. If it was a little bit longer, I would probably need to adjust my hand so that the lower end of the ruler didn't slide and make a line that was not exactly straight. As the distance gets smaller, my hand span is wide enough that I can keep pressure on both the front and the back. You have to be careful, though, not to put too much pressure because then the needle doesn't want to move across the plate in the ruler base. So here's some combination ruler work and free motion quilting, different designs on each block. And that's the Glide thread. I believe that color is called khaki. And then here's pantographs again, using the rear handlebars. And that's the, you know, it has a control on it so that when you have this hooked up, you would have all your settings right there on the back with you. And here's oh boy, I restarted it. Can't touch it with the Apple Pencil. And I don't really have a way on the iPad to go back to that part. So, well, like I said, technology is great when it works, and when it doesn't work, it lets you down. So I am going to, let's see if I can maybe speed this up this way. No, it's not going to work. So I'd like to thank you all for coming. And like I said before, we'd be happy to do more extensive classes on different long arm techniques. This was meant just to be an overview to give you an idea of the different quilters that we have at Pfaff right now, and the different tables and why you would want one and not another, perhaps, the different optional feet and other optional accessories that we have, and different ideas of what to do with them. So if there are some of you that have those feet, I'd be happy to do a class just on the feet and show different techniques. And we will consider doing how to load the big frame class with a different, because there are different methods to load the frame. So thanks for sticking with me and through some technical glitches. And I really appreciate you coming to my class. Happy Quilter Month, and I hope you all get to quilt today. So thanks again for joining us, and have a nice day.